Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us this month for Tiger Talk. This month I'm joined by Darcy Love, our principal at Parkside Elementary, and we're going to talk today about reading, and especially literacy and early literacy at Parkside Elementary, some of the successes we're seeing and some of the changes that are taking place within our literacy instruction. Done a lot of work over the last few years and excited. Something Darcy gets just a little bit excited to talk about. So
maybe to a fault.
It's good though. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But like we do every month, just before we get to the details, I want to talk about some general updates across the district. We're starting off the new school year, and there's so many fun things. This is a fun time of year in our schools. A lot of excitement. Kids are still excited to be in school for the year, and fall activities all taking place. So I want to share some updates. At Parkside Elementary in particular, we have our early childhood through our first grade classes. Families that showed great support this fall. We had open houses. We started the year with that. A really good turnout for those. We had assessment events that took place in there. Students got to meet their teachers, got to see their lockers, and just kind of get that a little bit of establishment before the school year started. That worked out really well. In classrooms at the lowest elementary grades, that first month of school, we're really establishing that foundation, like routines. How to do school, building some routines, and how to build stamina with some of that. So building relationships, and all that's taking place at Parkside right now. So excited to see that stuff happening there. Also excited at Parkside, we got 2 grants recently from the Lyon-Murray County Families Collaborative. Those 2 grants are covering a few different things at the school. One key activity that's covering is some attendance incentives. We focused a lot on attendance the last couple of years, looking at our number of students who are chronically truant in particular. That means students who are missing 10% or more of the school year. And at Parkside, that grant, it was enough that we were able to purchase a bike from the bike shop downtown, and some students with attendance meeting a certain criteria will be able to win a bike at the end of the year. So that's exciting.
Actually, it's a bike every quarter.
Bike every quarter, even more often.
There
you go. 4 bikes. 4 bikes to give away, so that's awesome. Another thing we're doing with the grant is there's some parent education nights. That's for students, from preschool students. They can come and attend and learn more about just parenting and getting ready to start school with some of our youngest learners. So that's a good program as well. At Southview Elementary, we are starting our 3rd year of BAR implementation. This will be our final implementation year with the BAR program at that level. BAR, again, is Building Assets, Reducing Risks. It's a framework we use to look at how we really target individual instruction. So it talks about building relationships, and it talks about getting to know kids, and it talks about the data around how are they doing in school. Not just academically, but attendance data, behavior data, all those pieces that kind of come together to show that whole picture of the learner. So that's some good work taking place there. In that implementation this year, they're starting some teacher meetings. They call them big block and small block meetings. That's when they're looking at data and really identifying student needs and identifying who's going to be working with students to meet those needs. So that collaboration is an important part of that work, and that's taking place, certainly setting that this fall at Southview. Another thing at our elementary schools, a lot of changes are taking place. We're going to talk about this with Darcy in just a minute, but with the READ Act, it's a state initiative that started a couple years ago, looking at how we teach reading and those foundational reading skills in particular for all of our students. So there's a lot of changes taking place in our schools this year because of this work. One of the key things that parents and families are going to see is with our assessments. You've heard us talk about NWA assessments for a number of years. We've used those. I've been in the district for 25 years, and we've used NWA for all of that time. But some of these changes requiring a different way to look at assessments. Some new assessments are going to take place. So NWA is no longer in place for Marshall Public Schools. We're using a variety of different things. The DIBELS assessment is something you've heard us talk about previously at Parkside. That's going to continue. And then a new one called CAPTE Read Basics. That's going to take place for our 4th graders all the way through our 12th graders. So it's looking at the reading skills, reading levels, reading abilities of all of our learners, and identifying exactly which skills they're strong in, which skills they need some extra support in, that sort of thing. So we're excited about some of that work. We've set some initial assessments have taken place this fall, establishing baselines, and really that's driving the assessment work that's taking place in our classrooms and helping drive our instruction. So we're excited about that happening. It's going to look different for families, and it's certainly different for our teachers in our classrooms and how that's going. So working through all that. Also some changes with math assessment, just as we're changing assessments, doing some different things with that as well. So encourage families to watch for more information from your schools and to learn more at conference time when you come in this fall and talk about that with teachers. Middle school, we had open house at that level as well to start the school year. The first day was open house day. We had over 95% attendance in the middle school, so that's one of the best attendance rates we've had there in years. And then each grade level had a chance, as the school year kicked off, to sit down with the principals and talk about just expectations for the school year. So that was some exciting work that's happened there. Middle school is also excited about a couple of new classes that take place within their schedule during the day. All middle school students have an advisory block and a flex block that happen in the day. They're providing some consistent support and enrichment times in the day. So elementary, the schedule's a little bit more flexible because you have students in one room all day long. So we talk about how we provide instruction and how we provide intervention. It looks different elementary level than middle school and high school level when they're scheduled to a certain block and then rotate teachers each block of the day. So middle school is creating a little more flexibility in the schedule by adding these other classes. So students needing more intervention will have time for that, and students needing more enrichment being students who are meeting the standards or exceeding the standards, some time to push them as well and enrich their education. So excited about some of those changes taking place at those levels as well. So families with students that age, you probably heard them talk about a class you've never heard of before, because there is a new one and it's going well so far. At Marshall High School, a lot of things taking place there, a lot of academic and activity engagement. We started the year a little bit different this year. We had homecoming very early in the school year this year. That was a change. We had the theme Welcome to the Jungle at the high school for homecoming this week. Just that starting the school year off, there's all that extra excitement in the year anyway, and then having homecoming with it. It was a really fun homecoming week this year. A lot of energy on campus, and we had a fun dance and activities. I think we had 17 different home games that took place during that week. So thanks to all of our coaches and all the fans that support our activities department in that way as well. At the ALC, staff are focusing on attendance and student engagement just in general at that level. Our ALC is students who are credit deficient, so not necessarily on track to graduate, so really working on engaging those students and getting them involved in the schools. Big way we're doing that, and big focus continues to be with career readiness, so adding some different things around CTE and just learning job skills in the classrooms, and that's taking place at that center. And of course, our CTI Center is our last site. At the CTI Center, we have a new teacher out there this year, so some changes in some class offerings at that level. Certainly seeing a lot of engagement from students. We're almost 19% greater registrations at that center this year, so we're excited about that. And at the CTI Center, starting the year, they're in the shop, so every year we start with learning some basic shop safety and just building some skills and refreshing some skills, because for some students it's been a semester or two since they've had some of the foundational classes. So a lot of exciting things. One thing I just want to share with the CTI that I'm excited about, I got an email from the admin assistant out there the other day, and she says, "You won't believe this. Our kids at CTI," she said, "they're showing up for class a half hour before class starts in the morning, wanting in to come into the shop and start working." That's not something our students typically do. And then when the bell rings, typical high school class, you see the bell rings and they are racing out the door to go to lunch or whatever might come next. At CTI, the bell is ringing and the kids are wanting to stay and keep working. So great to see just that level of engagement, excitement around the projects taking place out there. That site, we're just very excited about the work taking place out there. In our activities department, I mentioned already a little bit about homecoming, but activities is always an exciting spot for us. We had homecoming week that week of September 12th. Want to thank Student Council for planning such a fun week there. Just showcasing a lot of talent of our student athletes, and all of our fall teams are off to great success. I'm not going to touch on all of those this year, or this time around. One thing I do want to mention with activities department though is we have our M Club Hall of Fame. Every year, every couple of years, they do an induction of new members to the M Club Hall of Fame. We have a ceremony planned for this fall. It is on November 15th. The event will take place at the Marshall Golf Club. And this year we are honoring new inductees. Chelsea was Pack, it's now Marquardt, Pat Ersfeld, Bruce Remy, and Drew Kinseth will all be inducted into the M Club Hall of Fame. So if you're interested in attending that event, again, it's November 15th at the Marshall Golf Club. Tickets are $30 and they're available through Amber Gorder from our activities office. You can call the main high school number and ask for Amber, and she'll get you tickets for that if you'd like to come attend that event. In our operations department, I want to highlight a project taking place. If you've been by the middle school recently, you see some construction taking place kind of along the back, connecting C Street all the way over to Southview. The city has received a grant, and the city is building a bike path that connects those two streets. certainly that's a big enhancement for student safety, getting to school. We're excited to see that go up. I think we're going to have a lot of students using that when that's done. There's also a connecting point from that new bike path that goes up to Southview Elementary. The city's also putting that piece in as part of the grant, so we certainly appreciate their work on that effort, and we are looking forward to having this done. They started that project on September 15th, and we're hoping before the snow flies this year that project will be complete. They're coming along nicely. Last thing with operations she wants to share is if you're by the high school recently, you may have seen MnDOT. They had some of the counters put out around the roads right around the high school, collecting some traffic counts along Highway 23 and Tiger Drive. All right, so we've got some J-turns that are being installed around the high school, and those J-turns are going to enhance safety as cars are entering the high school off Highway 23. So the traffic counts are out there. We're just monitoring that as part of that project. That is scheduled to take place in 2028. So a little bit out yet before that starts, but all the prep work starts early with that project. Finally, I want to just mention before we get into our topic for today, reminder, we do have the operating referendum that we're running. Marshall Public Schools is one of very few schools in the state. We're one of 5 Minnesota schools that are operating without local funding. That's the operating levy. What's happening is our funding is not keeping up with our costs, or the amount of money that we're getting from the state is just not keeping up with inflationary costs. We've stretched every dollar in our district. We had some COVID relief dollars that came for a few years, and they helped us get through for a few years. Those monies are all gone, and we're to that need again that we talked about back in 2022 when we asked for operating referendum. The need still exists. So we're looking at a $2 million operating referendum, asking the community to come and vote on that and give us some feedback on that. This money is to maintain programs that are currently in place. We want to keep the programs in place that are being so successful for our students. We talk about activities, we talk about low class sizes, we talk about the CTE pieces where students are getting connected to school. All of those things will be impacted by our operating funds. So think about a business. If the business budget is not balanced, they either have to increase their revenues or decrease their expenses. At a school, the only way we can increase revenues is by asking for the local operating referendum. We don't get to control how much money the state gives us. We don't get to control how much money the federal government gives us. We get the funding that we get from them and have to balance our budget within that. So we are asking for that increase in revenues through the operating referendum. That $2 million would fill that gap that we're seeing right now, and we can maintain programs we have in place. If this referendum is not successful this fall, we'll be looking at about $2 million in cuts this spring. The board recently passed a resolution that would authorize and direct the administration to reduce the budget by that $2 million. $1.9 million specifically is the amount we were asked to reduce the budget by. That's 29 staff members in our district that would be eliminated across the district at all learning levels. Includes programming, includes bigger class sizes, includes cuts in transportation. So certainly something that we don't want to see happen in the district, but asking the community, this is the public school or your schools, we need your support, and we need to know where the community is at with that. So we're asking for support with the referendum, and just want to be clear with what the needs are. Encourage everyone to check out the microsite we've created. It's tomorrowstigers.org. There's a lot of information on that site about the referendum. It talks about the need, it talks about the cost. A key thing on that website is the tax calculator, so you can put in your address, find out the exact tax impact to your home if this referendum is to pass. Encourage you all to check that out, ask us questions as you have them. And the main thing I'm encouraging community to do is to come and vote. Early voting started already. It's open now at the district office. So every school day from 8 o'clock until 4:30, you can vote in the district office. It's in the back side of the middle school. There's signs kind of all around. If you're not sure what that is, just follow the signs up to the main door, district office door. It's door number 12. You can vote in there. There's absentee voting. You can request a ballot by mail. Just go to tomorrowstigers.org and click a button and get a ballot mailed to your house, and you can fill that out and send it back. Or, of course, election day is November 4th. You can come vote that day. That voting is also at the district office. This is the only question on the ballot this year is the question about the referendum. So if you don't vote early, come in on November 4th to the district office. We're open from 7 that morning until 8 that evening. And cast your vote, make your voice heard, and tell us how you want us to cover this gap of the district. So appreciate everyone's consideration of that. All right. Darcy. So we want to talk about reading and what's taking place at our elementary school. There's a lot of changes. I think about a few years back, I used to be elementary principal at the other elementary site, And when I was leaving, we were talking about balanced literacy and what that looked like in the classroom. That has changed. It's morphed into something new. We're talking about science of reading now. So why don't you talk a little bit about what prompted that move from balanced literacy to science of reading, maybe what that looks like, and why we did that.
Sure. So as you referenced, balanced literacy, it's as it would suggest, it's a balance between two models, if you will, of teaching reading. And so I'm sure many of you probably have experienced either a whole language approach to teaching you how to read, which would be like Dick and Jane books, and finding books where kids just love to read and that they'll naturally learn how to read if they find the right fit and the right book for them. Kids will just automatically learn how to read, much like language. So we don't have to teach kids how to talk. They eventually pick it up from being surrounded by that language. On the other end of that spectrum was phonics. And so that was an emphasis on teaching letter sound correspondence and then how those go together. It was often criticized as being boring and those kinds of things. And so probably in the last 20 years or so, balanced literacy is what emerged, which is kind of the middle ground between those two programs. And so you do teach some phonics, but then you also teach that love of literacy, more memorizing words over and over, reading, repetitive reading, that kind of thing. And so I would say it was actually the 21-22 school year, and it was kind of a perfect storm of different things that had happened. We had started a new program called Really Great Reading, which was our phonics instruction, because our teachers were feeling inadequate, I guess, with the curriculum that we had, and they felt like they just wanted a more structured program. And so we implemented Really Great Reading. As part of that, there was a whole professional development piece based on the science of reading. And so our teachers were starting to hear more about this science of reading. And so one of the things that we did as a result of that was said, well, how can we put pieces of science of reading into our balanced literacy classroom? And so we did a book study. It was called The Six Shifts. And it was just talking about how to implement some of those same things into the balanced literacy instruction. And so we did that. And then I had taken a class through the University of Florida called The Foundations of Reading. And or of literacy development. And I'll never forget the article that I read. It was called Hard Words by Emily Hanford. And it's one of those articles that when a teacher reads, you kind of curl up your toes and say, ow. That kind of smarts a little bit, because basically it called teachers out and said that the reason students were struggling to read is because we didn't know about the science of reading, and or we were choosing not to use that research in our instruction. And so that kind of prompted all of us to kind of start looking at what are we doing and how can we get better results, because we were seeing okay results, but there still were a good third of our students who were still struggling. And that just wasn't acceptable, because my whole entire educational career, literacy is the best gift we can ever give a child. And so that's our mission. We want to make sure every student has the skills they need to be a reader.
Right. We talk about preparing all students for success, all learners for success, and that's a key way to do it. It goes all the way to the very foundational level. Yeah.
Right.
So anytime there's a shift in curriculum or in learning styles, that's a challenge for teachers. It can, like you said, it can make your toes curl a little bit.
Yeah.
Certainly you face some challenges, some successes. Talk a little bit about initial challenges and successes that you faced with that.
Yeah, and rightfully so. You know, teachers, myself included, I've been in education a long time, more than 30 years, and I hate to even say that because it's hard to believe. But nonetheless, you know, we are always getting the flavor of the month. You know, you need to do this, you need to do that, or that curriculum, you know, goes from one side to the other. There's a big pendulum switch. And so teachers often get frustrated with, oh, here's the next best thing. And so, you know, there is always, I don't want to call it resistance, but some skepticism. but I think that because the science of reading was a culmination of research from all different areas, not just education, but it was looking at neuroscience, it was looking at all these other different areas, like you can't refute that. When you look at a brain scan of a student who has dyslexia compared to a student who doesn't, and you can see what's taking place in their brain, you really can't refute
Right.
that
The
evidence.
science of reading.
The science,
Right.
yeah, exactly. So I think initially there's always some questioning and some, and again, I don't want to even call it pushback, but just some skepticism. Like, okay, is this just going to be the next best thing, and then we're going to go back to the way we did it before? And so I think then once we started to see, that science of reading and the really great reading, and we took some of those letters classes, that then people were like, oh, and it made sense. It wasn't something that was like, I don't know about this, but it really did make sense.
Kind of all those pieces that we've talked
Right.
about, it seemed like we were missing or weren't sure what to do with it, pull
Exactly.
them together.
Yeah.
So the training, you mentioned the letters training a little bit. So there's letters, and then our staff is all doing the OLA training as well. Early childhood's doing the letters. We had a few teachers even did letters prior to being required from the state from some of those pieces. So I think that's something you touched on is we'd started some of this work, and then the state came and said, oh, we're going to change everything. And actually, we were already on that path when the
Yeah.
state did that. So
Yeah.
through the letters training and the OLA training and these READACT trainings that our teachers are doing, what looks different in a classroom now from previous?
Yeah, great question. So I had shared with the board that prior to this, we had been using balanced literacy, and when the state came out with the READ Act that took effect in, I believe it was 22, we had been using the balanced literacy, and thankfully we had already started a lot of those shifts. But then what happened when they announced this READ Act was that balanced literacy was no longer going to be supported by the state as an approved curriculum. And so we saw a lot of very upset school districts because they had spent a lot of money on this curriculum, on this balanced literacy curriculum. And so what has changed for us is that we no longer use those curriculums, and we hadn't for some time already.
We'd already implemented
Right,
really great
we had
reading.
already implemented things. And so really what that letters and OLA training did for us was, one, affirm those changes that we were making were the right things to do. And it also helped us to identify what we needed to do differently in our instruction. So I always say the science of reading is the science and the reason, but letters and OLA is the how. This is how we are going to put that in place.
Could you touch base just a little bit on some of those strategies that are really effective when we're building teacher capacity and helping our students grow? Like, what are some specific things they might be doing?
Sure. And so what you'll see in our classrooms now is very, for our phonics instruction, it's very systematic and very explicit. And so we don't just assume that a student has all of their letter names. They know all of the letter names, they know all of the letter sounds, and they know what symbol or letter goes with that sound. We teach that very explicitly. And so the other piece of that, even before we start talking about letters, is just that phonological awareness. So being able to take a word and break it apart. So if the word is cat, knowing that there are three sounds, k, at, and so spending time helping them dissect those words and know that there are three sounds, because that's important then when we are trying to spell those, when we're trying to learn the letter sounds. And that's often a difficult thing. It may not seem like that, but English is one of those languages where we talk quickly and sometimes we miss syllables, and so then that translates into it being difficult to learn.
Right, for all learners.
For all learners,
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. So I mentioned the DIBELS assessment earlier as an assessment we've used for a few years now at Parkside. Last year was one of our primary assessment sources. So talk a little bit about that data and what successes you're seeing already with.
Sure. So we started our DIBELS assessment in that 21-22 school year, and it's called the Dynamic Indicator of Basic Early Literacy Skills, and it allows us to just monitor and intervene when kids are not getting those foundational literacy skills that they need to decode words. And so we do that at the very beginning of the year. We identify students who are having difficulty, then we put them into interventions and different instructional models to make sure they get those skills, and then we monitor that along the way. So if they're not making progress, what do we need to change or do differently? And again, it's just assuring the mastery of those early literacy skills.
Right, absolutely. So thinking about the student achievement that we're seeing so far, talk a little bit about what that's looking at, because it's pretty exciting what's happening. It's been just a couple years, some tweaks to some classrooms, some changes. I think one thing we're seeing is more alignment between the core instruction and the intervention. Used to be our core lesson would cover whatever the next thing is in our scope and sequence, and then intervention would say, okay, but I know they're behind on this, but there's really a lot of alignment now. So we're teaching the same things and going to what skills, and the results we're seeing. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting thing is that of all of our students last year who took the DIBELS assessment, 91% of them grew at least one level. We only had a very small portion who were not at benchmark or above, but even the ones that were below made so much growth and so much progress. And to me, that's why it's all
huge.
worth it.
Yeah.
You know,
I use that data. I'm presenting about the referendum in the community, and that's one of my data points on that point. And I share the story that when you called me last spring and said that's our data, I said, go check that again. We've never seen 90% of our students making growth like that before. I mean, we've seen good results, but never to that level. And it's just I just got goosebumps again just saying it again. It's just,
same.
That's awesome. This work is paying off. I mean, our students are benefiting from that. That's what we're here to do, is to see that. So that's
very
that's
exciting.
Great. Another piece of that work that's taking place is we've got the Literacy Advisory Task Force team. I don't forget the exact name of it. But this team that's just district-wide. Talk just a little bit about what that looks like and how we're making sure there's the same conversations across the district.
Yeah, and that kind of came as a result of the READ Act. We were making some really good growth and changes and some different things at Parkside, but we felt like this is something that we need to have district-wide because their learning isn't done in first grade. We have to continue to develop those skills. And so we just wanted to bring everybody along and be on the same page through this whole journey. And so really that's what that Literacy Task Force did, is brought together all of those instructional coaches and building principals and our curriculum director to look at our literacy instruction and make those changes district-wide and not just in one spot.
So really talk about that alignment. I talked a little bit about alignment between the core instruction and intervention, but that also the alignment between Parkside and Southview and middle school is important as well. So while our Parkside and our Southview teachers have had all this training, the state's kind of directing when we do the training and how we implement. Middle school and high school are next, and it's next year that training starts. So new curriculums and some new strategies are starting there, but the training and the core pieces of the science of reading is still coming at that level. So I have two questions left for you.
Okay.
First one is, what about this work is the most exciting for you?
Well, it's all exciting.
Right.
You know that. But again, as I said at the very beginning, literacy is the best gift we can give our kids. And so it means so much to me to be able to say that when our kids leave, they have a solid foundation to becoming readers, because that's going to help them throughout their whole life be successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. Last thing I just want to touch on, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this one. But,
Oh, boy.
as you talk a bit, it reminds me of a quote that you share a lot, and you had it on you presented at the board meeting the other night, and you had it up there, Maya Angelou quote.
Yeah.
Can you just share that with the community?
When we know better, we need to do better. And so that has really what has been guiding our work since the very beginning, is that, we have always done the very best that we can and know how to do. But when we learn and when we know better, then we need to do better. And so I think that is something that can guide your whole every part of your life, but also for education specifically. When we learn new things and we know better, then we need to do better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we go in education for. We're all here for the kids. We learn better how to meet those needs and how to support those needs. It is exciting to go in and put that in, even if it's a lot of work. And then when we see the results coming out of it, that's awesome.
Yeah,
So thank you
absolutely.
so much for all
Yeah.
your work on this and for supporting our youngest learners. And really, you're driving this for the whole district while you work out of Parkside. Your passion for
Yeah.
this is what's bleeding into all of our other levels. And it's exciting to see that work. So I really do appreciate
Yeah,
that, Darcy.
thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
For our viewers, we appreciate you watching today and learning a little bit more about early literacy instruction and our start of the school year at Marshall Public Schools. Look forward to seeing you again next month on Tiger Talk.